Hey everybody, it's Zach Hall. I'm back with another video. It has been a long time. Don't think I've done one in 2020 yet, so it's probably been maybe 2 months since my last video. Um, but I thought today, Fate Condensed just came out from Evil Hat maybe a week ago, and I'm super excited about it. You might have seen previous video that I did covering the Fate Space Toolkit, which I am super excited about. I've kind of talked about that a little bit. If you follow my socials, you know that I'm just a huge fan of the Fate system, both core, which is what I'm most experienced with, and accelerated. They're just great systems for my style of gameplay, which is basically I want to play in my favorite TV show or my favorite movie or my favorite comic book or my favorite book series. Being able to continue to tell stories past the like official canon. So Fate is just a super quick and easy way of doing that. And what they've done, which I think is super smart of Evil Hat, what they've done is they've taken the 300-page book, or so I actually have the book, the actual core book right here. Hang on. They've taken this full Fate core book, which was published, I think it's been maybe at least 10 years now. But it's almost a 300-page book. Let me double check when it was published. 13. So it's been about 7 years now since Fate Core was first published. And they have taken that 300-page book and they've condensed it down to just a 50-page document, and a little bit of updating to the rules. Nothing huge. Like Fate Core is still Fate Core, and Fate Condensed is basically like a I don't know, maybe like if Fate Core is version 1.0, which is not, it's more like version 4.0 of the Fate system. But if it's 4.0, Fate Condensed might be 4.1. I think it's a great entry point for folks who maybe you're an experienced game master and you don't need a ton of examples and introduction to what role-playing games are, et cetera, et cetera. You just want to be able to see exactly how the system functions. Fate Condensed is perfect for you. It is currently up on the PDF is currently up on both Evil Hat's itch store and on Drive-Thru RPG. But I just wanted to do a quick video of basically my first look. I've not looked at this document. I am familiar with Fate Core, love running it, but thought this would be a cool video to kind of look through, tell you all about it if you haven't known about it. So Fate Condensed is still part of Fate's licensing. So Fate runs in the similar way of like Powered by the Apocalypse runs, that if you want to run a game, they have almost all of their game rules is up on the Fate SRD that you can use in your own game if you're running something. I believe Fate Condensed was part of the Kickstarter for Fate of Cthulhu. And so, yeah, very excited. So look at this. Technically, okay, so 52 pages, but really 50 pages since introduction starts at page 3 and the last page seems to be 52. So all of this system is being thrown into 50 pages, which I just think is great. So, in as compact form as I can manage, I think that's right. I don't think there's any other things, considering that they've cut a 300-page book down into 50 pages. You could easily take Fate Condensed, and depending on what you're running, if you were, for instance, what I really want to run is a Expanse game based on the book and television series The Expanse, and use Fate to run it. Can easily do that with the 50-page Fate Condensed book, and then the maybe like 50 pages that I really need from Fate Space Toolkit. It's just a great system. So same things that we always need to run Fate. You're going to need some dice, some tokens to represent Fate points. And I prefer to use like something like index cards if you have them lying around, or if you're willing to invest getting some small dry or wet erase cards that are similar size but reusable instead of kind of throwawayable. Bare minimum, some sticky notes to write things like situational aspects on. Then we got Fate dice, which are really cool. I wish there was more in this kind of renaissance of RPG games and all the incredible artisan dice that's out there. I hate that Fate dice get kind of, and Fudge dice get left by the wayside of that. It's so hard to find cool, colorful, exciting Fate dice. It's all just your standard, 7 core dice, your D20s, your D6s, blah, blah, blah. But you can run it. I have run Fate with just normal D6s. So you can do that too. I've not played a game yet with Fate of the deck of Fate, which is super cool. It's just a card deck with the same amount of randomness, and you just draw a card instead of rolling the dice. Which honestly, like, I think could be really fun, especially on the go. I mean, you could take this, I think they're looking at doing print on demand for this. I mean, I would not blame Evil Hat at all if they decided not to, print this. It's a 50-page document that, I don't know if it would make business sense to really print 500 of them or 1,000 of them or whatever unit makes the most sense. So you're probably not going to find Fate Condensed at your favorite local game store. But Pod would be great. I would absolutely buy it on demand, because I could take Fate Condensed and the deck of Fate basically with me and run any Fate game that I wanted. Yeah, it'd be great. So let's check out the changes from Fate Core. Kind of an explanation of what I've already said. 300 pages down to 50. 1-point stress boxes to help reduce confusion, which I think makes sense. Balsera style initiative or elective action order. That was a variant or an optional rule in Fate Core, and it's just the default now, which I think makes sense. I see other game systems do this really well. I think the one I have seen it the most useful and do the most is with Star Trek Adventures. They do kind of popcorn initiative, just players choose who wants to go first, and then you swap over to the adversaries. So super cool. But that's now the default. So they've made some changes to advancement by eliminating significant milestones and finessing major to compensate. I think that probably will make sense. I'll take a look at that on page 39 here in a little bit, but I have found that Fate games are generally one-shots or short games. Like, you're not going to see because it's not a leveled style game like a Pathfinder or a D&D, etc. There's not a determined tree that you're really chasing. The games end up being a little more on the shorter side, because you don't have it in your idea, this idea of taking something all the way to 20, level 20 or whatever the end level might be. Removed the notion of active opposition as separate from the defend action. Remove the notion of active opposition. Oh, okay. So yeah, so in Fate Core, there used to actually be this active opposition that wasn't the same thing as using the defend action, which does kind of muddy the waters. But when am I actually supposed to use defend for? So they've taken that out, and then there's some effects about that for a tie result. So that's cool. They now actually bring up full defense. And it looks like defend action has had an expanded scope, which is good, because I think it needed to kind of see a little bit more to make it useful. And then are presenting some additional rules from DFA and Fate Adversary, which is super cool because, if you kind of have a hitch about Fate, it's that while everything is so darn cheap for what the amazing game system you're getting, is that some rules do get spread out over different systems. So like if you want to run a full, like a magic system that you want to bring a certain level of like crunchiness to, you should probably go find the rules from Dresden Files and get it. And then they've got all the toolkits, which are amazing if you run a lot of Fate games, but it does mean collecting a couple different PDFs. So I like a lot that they pulled in a couple different rule sets that have found themselves popular with the community, and they're just putting it here in Fate Condensed instead of leaving it up to those other books. So we've got our getting started. First off, I really like, so no art, which you know what you're getting. I think if you pay or are getting Fate Condensed, you know that it's cut out as much fluff as possible. And while I think art is great, I love looking at art, and it does can bring you into a world and give you an idea of what a world is supposed to look like. It does become trying as a GM who's just trying to read through a PDF, potentially even on my phone or on my tablet, of like scrolling past full page art to try to get to the rule set that I need. So I really actually like that there is a just very printer friendly, no art, just bare bones available rule set that I can just get. And I wish more folks would do that, even if it was an included price, included cost to the normal rule set of like, oh, also here's our kind of like condensed version of the Pathfinder rules, which would obviously be like still huge, kind of hard to take a 550 page book and narrow that down. So we're going to define our setting. We're then going to create our characters, and same stuff that Fate already has. We've got aspects, skills, stunts, stress, consequences, your refresh, and then like your personal details and stuff. Aspects are what drives Fate. And so the very first thing, you're on page 4, you're already reading about aspects. Again, as a GM, a forever GM trademark, being able to have a 50-page document that I can send to potential new players, like if I'm running a new actual play and using Fate, instead of sending a 300-page book, PDF or otherwise, to my players, having this is just make it so much easier to hand out to players, just to immediately know, here's what you need to know to be able to run this game. So we've got aspects that are short phrases of who your character is or what's important to them. The first thing to know about them is aspects are true. So in other words, how you define your character is real and true in the story that you are telling. So if you write down that your character is a precog sniper, then they are a precog sniper. You've told everyone that your future sees the future and is a crack shot with a rifle. I love aspects, and honestly, like as I read fiction or as I watch movies, I've even started to think of what would this character's high concept be. Or what would their other kind of like free aspects of their trouble be? So really popular one, I've been rereading the Dresden Files book series. It's my favorite of all time, and a new book's coming out this year. I think it's the book, the series 20th anniversary. And so I'm going back through it. And obviously Fate is an Evil Hat has the Dresden Files IP for role-playing games. And so we have a Dresden Files role-playing game that has concepts. But the main character, Harry Dresden, his high concept would be that he is a, wizard detective in Chicago. And wizard detective in Chicago, even if you just said wizard detective, those two words tell you a lot about the world that you're playing in. You're saying that magic is real. My character has the ability to use magic. I am a detective, so I'm really good at investigations, potentially at talking with people, at finding out stuff. Being just those two words tell you so much about the character, and it's so important when you are creating your Fate character. And honestly, like, even as like I read and consume fiction, it just makes a ton of sense that, like, even if you're an author or a potential a you know, maybe you want to become an author, I feel like Fate games and RPG games in general is such a great way of creating your own characters. Just get something on paper. So you've got your trouble, something that makes your life a little more complicated, and then a relationship with another PC. And I love role-playing games that in character creation, you are creating relationships with your other player characters, your adventuring party, if you will. It makes session 0 and session 1 go so much easier when you have pre-established relationships, and that there's a history there, that a life has been lived, and that you have already created relationships with the people that you're adventuring with, instead of your classic trope you meet in a tavern kind of stuff. A couple free aspects, and then we have the skills and the skill ladder. I'll be honest, I always just use the rating instead of the adjectives because I can't keep it straight. But if I was going to create the skill ladder is absolutely the number one thing that would be on a Fate GM screen if you were the type to run with a screen. So you choose your character skills: 1 great, 2 good, 3 fair, 4 average, and all others mediocre. Another thing that I love about Fate is that you can leave some of your skills empty and decide in game that, hey, like, I left 2 of my average skills and 1 of my fair skills empty, and I'm getting into a situation where I'm gonna I want to use a skill that I haven't assigned a rating yet. I'm gonna go ahead and I didn't think that, or wasn't sure how good my character was at picking locks, but session 1, I'm in a situation where I need to break into something, so I'm going to go ahead and put burglary in my +2 skill. Great. I love that flexibility. Because yeah, you don't always know exactly who your character is going to be when you get into the game. So we've got a description of our default skill lists. It's super easy to swap one in and out, rename something to make sure that it fits with your setting. But overall, I find that they're really great. I will say the one thing that running the game, so many people don't think of, especially if you're running a modern game and it's the first modern setting game that your players have played in, if they're used to like D&D or something, they think of drive as like almost like willpower, as like the ability to like push through in a situation. And I was like, no, this is you driving a car. Like, drive can't get more literal than that. But if you don't read the description, you're like, oh yeah, I put a ton in drive because I've they're really driven to like accomplish something. I was like, nope, that's not only an aspect, a great aspect, not this skill. I love that I love this plain layout for it. So easy to go. They couldn't squeeze all the skill descriptions into 2 pages. It would be great if you could just lay them out and have them all there like in a book, but no problem. Will gets thrown out there at the end. And then alternative skill list. So when you're building your own implementation of Fate, the first thing to think about is whether or not you'll keep the same skill list. Absolutely. The skill list is the game for the most part. As a GM, the first thing that I do when I'm creating a potential new Fate game is, what is the skill list? What do I need to, is there anything I need to remove? Is there anything that I need to combine? Do I need to separate out anything? Do I need to add something totally new? So for like my Expanse game, I played with the skills a lot. I think there's maybe 20 skills in my Expanse game. Default has 19, and players rate their characters above the default of 0 and 10 of them. So about half you have some kind of rating. And if you change the number of skills, you may want to change how the ratings are allocated. I'd agree with that. If you add more skills, maybe add an additional fair or good skill, just so that I would say it's probably good to keep your players at, in divided by 2 or n divided by 2 minus 1 skills that they have rating in. Defaults gets focused on answering the questions, what can you do, but you don't have to do that. If you want a list focused on what do you believe, or the question, how do you do things, which is basically how Fate Accelerated does, job roles and accrue and so on. I mean, that would get really creative. I have not, besides approaches, which is the Fate Accelerated replacement of skills, which is basically you have 6 approaches to things. And like for one of them, I think is oh shoot, I can't remember what it was. Like sneaky, maybe. Let's just say it's sneaky, one of the approaches. No matter what you're doing, if you're doing it in a sneaky way, you would roll with your sneaky rating, which is great for on the fly quick games. Fate Accelerated is a great way to do, for instance, in my brain, a Harry Potter game, because the magic system is not set. There's not a lot of rules that J.K. Rowling created for her magic in Harry Potter. It's really about like, what are you trying to, like, how are you trying to accomplish this thing? So Fate Accelerated is great for that. Then skill ratings in Fate are structured to support character niches. That's why in the default, players start with a pyramid shape. I really do like the skill pyramid of basically like you have your 1 starting at great, and then you have a couple more that are good. You have a couple more that are fair. It's just good for balance. We actually do have a example here, which is great. So it's not like they've cut out all examples. They have just restricted this, how to sum up skills and assigning your own skills. They've got it down to just a couple sentences. Excuse me, just a couple sentences, which is awesome. We got refresh, which is the minimum number of fate points that you start with. You start with 3. You can also, depending on what kind of rule set you're using, you can have more or less fate, more refresh. So like you could do a trade-off of like adding a new stunt in exchange for having a refresh. And then stunts are what I have found the best way to explain stunts is that the game has rules, and then stunts allow you to bend the rules in your character's favor. So probably the number one way that I've seen a stunt used is you can give yourself a bonus for like a really specific instance, or to let you, in a very specific instance, let you use a skill that you otherwise couldn't use. So a stunt would potentially let you roll burglary for a social situation. I can't think of a really great example for that right now, but like using a skill in place of another skill that other characters couldn't do to let you kind of do the thing that you're really good at as much as possible. That's kind of what I've seen stunts be the most helpful with. Some great stuff for, and here's basically what I just said. You've got example you've got bonus granting stunts, and then you've got rule changing stunts, with the number one being swapping skills used in a given situation. Oh yeah, so like using stealth to backstab somebody instead of using the fight skill. That's absolutely that is a almost a given stunt depending on what kind of character you're building. Yeah, cool. Write this type of stunt as follows: because I blah blah blah, I can blah, but only blah. Yep, it's great. Because I don't believe in magic, I can ignore the effects of a supernatural ability, but only once per game session. That'd be really cool. I really like that. Because I'm a military trained sniper, I get a +2 when I use shoot to attack a target when I have a target in my sights. And they've used this different font in my sights as to indicate this is a situational aspect. So in this case, I would probably have had this player use a create an advantage roll to create an advantage, or just narratively they have set up on a roof somewhere and have aimed down the barrel and taken a moment to make sure that they're aimed properly. It's like, cool, now you can use your stunt to get a +2. Then you got stresses and consequences. So stresses and consequences is basically the health that in Fate. So no HP, which is great, because HP is a very gamified thing that does kind of, I am not a gamer that looks for a lot of vermicelitude in my games. Verisimilitude or vermicelitude, I forget the order of the M and the S in that word, but I'm not looking for a ton of realism in my game. But I do like that we have stress and consequences to represent the toll that a body can take, or even like the luck. It could represent the luck that it takes for you to dodge out of the way so that you aren't killed, but it does inflict a physical stress. So it doesn't always reflect like the fact that you got hit with something. It's just how many more of these things can happen before you are taken out or before you're in serious trouble. You have physical and mental stress. And then consequences are kind of like this additional thing, like, hey, like you just took a huge hit. You can take a consequence that lasts a long time, like depending on how bad the consequence was it a mild consequence? Well, that might last throughout the rest of the scene, and it impacts what your character can do and what other characters can do to your PC. Or it could be a severe consequence that ends up lasting multiple game sessions, and it takes a long time for you to recover from it. So big fan of the stress and consequences system. So this is one of the changes that they made it condensed, is that Fate Core used like incrementing. So like 1 stress and then a box for 2 stress and then a box for 3 stress. But it was really hard to communicate that to a player, like that it didn't tick up. It's not like you're counting down. It's like, okay, you just got hit for 1 stress, you mark the first box. But if you hadn't gotten hit with anything and then you get hit with a 2 stress attack, you don't mark the first and the second box, you just mark the second box, because that second box is actually representative of 2 stress, not the second stress on your stress track. But that's kind of complicated and kind of unnecessary. They have reverted Fate Condensed, and I think I've basically done this in my Fate games myself, is that like it basically counts up. You have boxes and each box represents a stress. Yeah, so like in Fate Condensed, you would mark multiple boxes depending on how much stress you got hit in. With Fate Core and default, you only mark 1 box for each time you got hit or something happened to you. You would just hit the box that was like more accurate to the situation. Fate Accelerate actually has a single track for stress. It doesn't separate out physical and mental. I don't particularly care either way. It just depends on what kind of game you're running. Yeah, I would say that because of the way the game is kind of run, I would probably almost make default 4 or 5 stress. And we might have to play around with that. So we got rolling the die. Number 1 rule, fiction first. I love that in Fate. It's like the idea isn't to find, and this is a difference in, you know, your more common D&D Pathfinder games is, you know, I'm going to look at my character sheet, and my character sheet's going to tell me what I can do, and then I'm going to decide what I can do based on what my character sheet tells me. That's a fun game to play. I still play that game a ton. But my favorite way to play is actually being able to tell a story, and I decide what my character does without even really having to look at my character sheet. My character sheet doesn't dictate the box that I have to play in. Let the fiction of the story that we're all telling together play out. And then based on what I decide my character should do, then I figure out, okay, what are the mechanics that look like that? And that's a team decision made at the table with you, the player, the GM, even involving the other players to see, like, does this skill make the most sense? And I love that type of game. I love fiction first Fate games. So much fun. So your standard, I'm going to do this. The GM either sets a difficulty level that you need to hit in order to succeed, or you are being actively opposed and someone, the GM, or I guess I could potentially another PC could roll a defend action, and you compare the two. And it's great. So, I mean, basically it. So you can invoke aspects to kind of get you, addition to what you rolled. You try to invoke you can spend a fate point that is kind of like Star Trek Adventures has momentum. The players have momentum, and then the GM has threat, but they're essentially the same thing, just named different things because of the story that Star Trek Adventures is telling. In Fate, the GM has their own pool of fate points, and then each player has their pool of fate points. Your refresh dictates to you how much fate points you start out a session with. And the thing that makes Fate kind of fun and the game, like the gamification of Fate, is this economy around fate points. Is deciding, okay, I'm gonna act in this way in this situation in order to try to get as many fate points as possible. I'm gonna try to do as well as I can in this situation that might not, like, it might be pretty easy, but I'm gonna go all out. Or I'm going to, I'm going to do the least amount as possible to reserve my fate points so that I can hang on to them for, because I know I've got that big boss that's coming up. Playing with that fate point economy, allowing something bad to happen to your character in a moment where maybe it doesn't really matter in the long term, in order to accrue more fate points so that you can then use them to be a badass in like the next scene or a couple scenes down the line, is great. So you can spend a fate point to invoke it, or free invokes are all over the place. A lot of stunts, or your create an advantage action creates aspects that have a free invoke where you don't have to spend a fate point to invoke it, and that gives you an automatic +2 to whatever roll if you're invoking an aspect. And then we've got the bogus rule. Anybody at the table can say that's bogus to invoking an effect. Simply put, the bogus rule is a calibration tool anyone in the table can use to help the group make sure the game stays true to its vision. Bogus rule is included in their safety tools, which I love that they're including safety tools. And they found, like, it's a 50-page document that they have created, and it's just true to the people that Evil Hat are, that they still found the space and the appropriate amount of effort to put in for talking about safety tools, which is great. Oh, so this is a great example of, like, someone invoking the aspect great at first impressions to throw a car. Yeah, that's likely bogus. But maybe that character has a supernatural stunt that makes them incredibly strong enough to plausibly throw a car, and this is their opening gambit in a fight with a horrible monster. I mean, maybe. I would still probably say that that's pretty bogus. Great at first impressions. Well, I don't know. Maybe, like, if they were trying to intimidate But again, that's why Fate really is a fiction first game. You have to kind of describe and talk out like not only what your character is doing, but what is their emotional state? What are they trying to accomplish by performing the action they're doing? If my player says, I would really like to flip this car over using my supernatural strength in order to try to either impress or intimidate the enemy and really make a big show of my strength, like, great, then yeah, you are great at first impressions, even if it's a negative or an intimidating impression. Absolutely invoke that aspect. That would be a personal aspect, like a character aspect that is on their sheet that does cost a fate point to invoke. So you can either do a +2 bonus to your roll or re-roll all 4 dice, which is great because you can decide to invoke an aspect after you roll. Love it. You can only invoke the same aspect, you can't invoke the same aspect multiple times on the same roll, but you can spend as many free invokes on an aspect as you would like on the same roll. Most often you'll invoke one of your character aspects, but sometimes you'll invoke a situation aspect or even make a hostile invocation of another character's aspect. Yep. So you use stunts, and you have outcomes. So the difference between the effort, so like your total between any skill bonuses or aspect bonuses and what you rolled on the dice, all that combined is your effort. The difference between your effort and whatever the difficulty was determined to be is measured in shifts. So if you beat the difficulty by 1, that's a 1 shift value. And those shifts determine how much stress you might be putting onto, a character. So if your effort's less than the target difficulty, you fail. If your effort's equal to the target, you tie. If your effort's 1 or 2 shifts target more than the target, you succeed. And then if your effort's 3 or more shifts more than the target, you succeed with style. Succeeding with style normally might invoke might create a situational aspect that you can then, with a free invoke, that you or other members of your party might be able to invoke later for more bonuses. When you fail, you might just fail, or you might succeed at a pretty major cost, or you might take a hit, like absorbing stress or using a consequence or something like that. And then when you tie, you can succeed at a minor cost, or you can just partially succeed at what you're doing. So this is great. In your success, what does it look like to apply fiction first to success? The fiction defines what success looks like. If Ethan didn't have the tools or experience needed to break into the safe, well, then maybe success is more like if he was able to like pull a couple of pages out of the safe, like in a crack or something in it. So if Ethan was on the team because he built the safe, that success might look like more like with style example. Yeah. So like, yeah, again, fiction first. Like, what if you told us what you were attempting to do? Hopefully, like, the best players in Fate tell you more than I want to attempt to open the safe. Okay, what are you doing to attempt? Like, what are you doing to open the safe? What are you hoping to achieve by doing this? Blah, blah, blah. And then you can just add more to the story, the fiction of it, once the result has been determined. So there's 4 actions. You've got overcome, you've got create an advantage, you've got attack and defend. So these are kind of like the biggest things. And again, I don't really mean to make this like a Fate core explanation video, but I do find that a lot of folks, they maybe haven't played with Fate core before, and so they might not know the system. So hopefully, if you're running across this video because it's talking about Fate Condensed, which is a fairly new product, but you've never played Fate core before, hopefully this is a cool explanation. The overcome is basically being able to, athletics to climb over walls, investigate, putting together clues. These are, think of overcoming almost like your generic skill check in D&D. You're trying to navigate through a forest. You would use your overcome action to, and a certain whatever skill, whether it's athletics or blah blah blah, to kind of get you through the forest. Creating an advantage is honestly like that's the biggest thing that players have a hard time grasping in Fate, especially if you're in a like combat or an encounter scenario, where creating an advantage is actually the best thing to do in a situation. But so many characters or so many players are just used to attacking and attempting to cause damage, where, you know, if you can get it, if you can kind of explain to your team of like, we're telling a story and we're just happening to use dice to decide if that story works. So just because you have a gun doesn't mean you would immediately shoot at the target. What if instead you decided to try to shoot out the one light in this warehouse to create an advantage so that it's pitch black, but then your werewolf friend who can see in the dark, he can then use that situational aspect to create, like, give himself a boost on his next thing. So basically you are creating, by creating an advantage, you tell a fiction of what you're attempting to do. You use that, whatever skill is the most applicable. And then when you succeed, you create a situational aspect that has one free invoke on it, which means that anybody else, on your team, another PC, can then use that free invoke on their next action to do something even better than they could have if you had just tried to straight up attack someone. If you succeed with style, there's 2 free invokes on it, which is just great. But if you fail, the enemy gets a free invoke on the aspect instead. So maybe you tried to shoot the light out, but you failed. If I was the GM, what I would say is, no, you actually succeed at turning out the light, but now it is the enemy's turn, and it turns out they brought their low light vision goggles and can see fine in the dark too, and now they get to have a free invoke on that. Just a really fun way of being able to tell a story. Attack's pretty like basic. I'll say that the shifts of success determine how much stress has to be used to absorb that attack. And then defending. So I am going to look at this. As a monster trying to eat your face. As a foe pushing you out of the way as they flee your wrath. What about when the cultist tries to stab you? Defend, defend, defend. Defend's the only reaction in Fate Condensed. You use it to stop something from happening outside your turn. Because it's a reaction, you're almost always facing an opposing roll rather than a static difficulty. Your enemy makes their roll and you immediately roll to defend against it, so long as you're the target or you can justify your ability to oppose it. So like if Superman can get in the way of the bullet that's being shot at an innocent bystander, even though he isn't the target of the attack, he can say, well, I am Superman and I have super speed and I could get in the way of it. Cool, roll defend. So if you fail your defend roll, obviously you take the hit. If you tie, you basically use the attack action or the create advantage action that is happening on the flip side. That tells you what the tie should be. If you succeed, you don't take the hit or you deny the enemy's action. And then if you succeed with style, you don't take the hit, you deny the enemy's action, and you even get a boost, which is awesome, a +1 to something that you can then use in the moment. So default list of skills follow these guidelines. Fight and shoot can be used to make physical attacks. Athletics can be used to defend against any physical attacks. Fight can be used to defend against melee physical attacks. Provoke can be used to make a mental attack, and will can be used to defend against mental attack. And then other skills can gain permission to attack or defend under special circumstances as determined by the GM or table consensus. Yeah. So we got aspects. Big picture about aspects. I don't think these have changed at all. They're talking about compelling aspects, different kinds of aspects, like character aspects, situational aspects, boosts. I will say the ellipsis trick is really great. If you want an easy way to ensure you have room to incorporate aspects into a role, try narrating your action with an ellipsis at the end, and then finish the action with the aspect you want to invoke, like this. Ryan says, I'm trying to decipher the runes, and ... rolls the dice, hates the result. And if I haven't been there, I've read about it. So he spends a fate point, invokes his character aspect, saying, well, I've read about these runes, and so I'm going to invoke that to re-roll, and he gets a better result. So I easily start rambling about their origin. Actually, my favorite way to spend fate points is invoking to declare story details, spending a fate point to add an important or unlikely detail to the story based on an aspect in play. Based on an aspect in play is really important there. If you go back and watch my Fate superhero game that I ran on Encounter RP's Twitch and YouTube channel, it's called Young Heroes of Fate. It was my first time running a Fate core game, and I allowed a lot of spending fate points to invoke story details that weren't necessarily like, because we were playing virtually, we didn't have a ton of situational aspects. There were definitely moments where if I was at a table and I was way more strict on like what situational aspects are there actually in this moment and what do your characters know about, really what ended up happening was, you know, a character spending a fate point to introduce something new into the fiction to make things crappy, like have a lot of fun with the situation. Ended up for a great story, ended up for a great show and an actual play, I think. Not a great example of how to actually use that rule. Compels are great and a huge part of the fate core or the fate point economy of being okay with accepting a complication that the GM or another player offers you so that you can accrue more fate points so that you can then spend them on other things. Creating aspects. Man, I just really love the topography. I love the simple layout. Like, this is just perfect for what this is. And honestly, like, I'll just say it again, I wish more publishers created more condensed versions of their rule set like this. This kind of talks about the different kind of scenes. Fate core or Fate uses a zone way of laying out. So instead of playing on like a 5x5 or an inch by inch grid that represents 5 feet and you only can move a certain amount of feet per round or whatever, they just split the map up into zones. I'm normally seen up in maybe 3 or 4 zones, and you can move one zone per round unless you have a stunt that allows you to move multiple zones in a single turn. It's great. Turn order. So this is one of the changes. So often you need to know who is acting precisely when, but in contests and conflicts, turn order or you don't need to know who is acting precisely when, but in contests and conflicts, turn order can become important. These scenes take over a series of exchanges, and in exchange, each involved character can take one overcome, create an advantage, or attack action, and can move once. Because defending is an action, it doesn't really matter. You can defend however many times you need to during other characters' turns, as long as you can justify it in the fiction. And then at the start of the scene, the GM and players decide who goes first based on the situation, and then the active player picks who goes next. So, which I think is great. So basically, the whole PC party, generally, unless let's assume the PCs were not surprised, you generally allow the PCs will go first. So like PC number 1 will go, and then they choose which next PC will go. That PC goes, and then generally once the PCs all end up going, it's then the NPC's turn, the GM's turn. I think, I really like that idea. It is less about there isn't an initiative role, which does signify to the players like you've entered into like this new kind of scene. And it's always special and it's always fun in a D&D or Pathfinder, or a game that uses an initiative role to say, let's roll initiative. It's a very big kind of moment at the table. But I do really like turn order. One thing that I don't think is actually laid out here, but one of the things that I really like that I've kind of ended up stealing from Star Trek Adventures and their momentum threat way is like, I would probably, as a GM, if I saw an opportunity to really kind of like, create something cool in the fiction and the story, what I would end up doing is potentially like offering to the players, hey, I will spend one of my pooled fate points. Thereby, there are going to be less invokes or stunts that the GM's NPCs can use. I'm offering to spend one of my own fate points if I can jump in here and I can take over the initiative for my NPCs. And it's up to the players. That's something that I would kind of offer. I don't see that laid out in the rules, but it'll be a lot of fun. So I'm going to skip kind of most of the conflicts and challenges stuff. Obviously, like it's good. This is the best way to put it. Simply put, stress is plot armor. It's the resource used to keep your character up and in a fight. So it doesn't, like, however your fiction makes sense, however you want to say it, like it just missed you or it hit you and you're kind of knocked down but not out kind of thing, then cool, like stress. But I think it's great, especially in this fiction first kind of game that we are talking about. Conceding is huge and important to know about. So we've got advancement. At the end of each session, you'll earn a minor milestone, which lets you move things around on your character sheet. And then as you conclude each arc of the story, you'll earn a major milestone, which lets you add things to your character sheet. Basically, like you can swap ranks and skills or rewrite a stunt at the end of each session when you've hit a kind of minor milestone, or rewrite an aspect even, especially if the fiction changes and your character changes and you need to rewrite an aspect. You have the opportunity to do that at the end of every game session after earning a milestone, which I think is awesome. The major milestones, you've spent the past 5 game sessions tracking down these cultists and you've finally beaten them. And while there's still this big trouble in your game setting that you're still tracking down, you've kind of accomplished like this kind of arc of story. You get to rewrite your high concept. If something huge has changed to you, you can add or rewrite your concept. You can begin the recovery process for any major severe consequences. And then you can increase the skill rating of one skill by 1 step, even if it's from mediocre to average, which is awesome. And then you can also, the GM can also allow the PCs to power up by offering, you can gain a point of refresh or you can increase a second skill, which is awesome. I do really like the pyramid. You can't move, like in this instance, you could not level up one level 1 skill to a level 2 skill because you would then have more +2 skills than you have +1. Like you still have to kind of achieve this pyramid column look. You got some GM stuff, which is, I mean, fairly basic for running running RPG games. making sure the key things for me is besides the rule stuff and blah blah blah, making sure everybody gets the spotlight and then complicating the PC's lives and building off of their player choices. This is how you make a good game, and that should be true for no matter what game you're running. Blah blah blah. It gives you some NPC rules. There is an entire, just over a page, which is great, but there's an entire toolkit called the Fate Adversary Kit about creating adversary NPCs, and it's important. So we've got our safety tools that talk about the X card and gives you the link for it, which is awesome. And then the script change RPG toolbox, which I actually have not looked at, which it provides options to pause, rewind, skip ahead, or more using. I might have to look into that. That's really, really cool. From Bree Bo Sheldon. Cool. I might have to look at that. I am a fan of the X card, but I do the script change toolbox does sound really, really interesting. You got some optional rules like conditions, versions of conditions, character creation as you play, which I kind of mentioned, extreme consequences. Full defense. Sometimes a player or GM may want their character to go all in on using defend until their next turn rather than taking an action. This is called full defense. When declaring full defense, you must be clear about the focus of your efforts. By default, you're defending yourself from attacks and efforts to create advantages on you, but you may wish to specify someone you're protecting or defense against a particular group of aggressors. While on full defense, you get a +2 to all defend rolls relevant to your declared focus. That's cool. And then if nothing comes of it and you don't roll a defend at all, you gain a boost, which is cool. Like it's not a huge thing. Scale. Interesting. I've not seen this before. Optional subsystem that you can use to represent supernatural beings, which operate on a level beyond the general range capabilities of most characters in your game. Usually you don't need to worry about the impact of scale within your game. I would agree. Like if, let's say you're playing a Dresden Files game, unless you are specifically creating a game about really, really, really low level mediocre magic users going up against big things, which I wouldn't recommend because it just like that you're setting your players up for a lot of failure unless you have a clear cut advancement for them, like they have the ability to gain more power. Normally scale's not going to come in, so you may wish to change. Mundane represents characters without access. Supernatural who do have access. Otherworldly, unusual or unique characters. Legendary, and then godlike. When applying scale to two opposing forces or individuals, compare the size levels. It determines who is higher and by how many levels. They get one of the following benefits on any rolled action against the lesser. +1 per level of difference before they roll, or +2 level of difference to the result after they roll if the roll succeeds, or a free invoke per level of difference. That would make sense. So like if again, running a Dresden Files campaign, if you're playing as a full-fledged wizard, but you're going up against one of the fairy queens, your fairy queen is a, godlike being. That I would say that is a 3-level difference, and just because their character sheet would look pretty similar, but even on like there does have to be a level of scale. So I really like this. This is actually really cool. Obviously very specific to the kind of game that you're running, but really cool. Setting aspects are huge. If you are looking for some more rules on how to create your setting with Fate Core has great rules for creating a setting. But yeah, scenario aspects and setting aspects are big. Cool. Reveal true form is amazing. A solo bonus, that's cool. Or D&D, such a huge issue is like having to throw bigger and bigger things at your powerful party members, but a lot of times it's just one enemy against your party. Giving like a solo bonus is cool. Anything can be characters. Why not a map? When the threat is a map, your big bad has zones which must be navigated to achieve victory. Yeah, that's awesome. Weapon and armor ratings. This does introduce a bigger of crunch to the game that I would hesitate to bring in unless you are really trying to show the power that your person has. So like sticking with Dresden Files, if I was running a Dresden File game, everything would just be normal. A normal sword would not have a weapon value or armor value. But let's say, or honestly, like I would almost use it as an aspect instead. Like if my character is purposefully armored up before going into a situation, like they put on chainmail that they don't normally wear or bulletproof vest or something, I would almost rather give them a let them write in a situation, like a scenario aspect on themselves that they could then potentially they could invoke for a defend roll or something like that. But excuse me. But in Dresden Files, there's these magical swords that are wrought from the nails that hung Jesus Christ of Nazareth on a certain cross. And I mean, without getting into religion, I myself am not religious. They carry faith with them. And so these swords have these nails embedded in them. I would probably give the knights or the swords of the Holy Cross, I would probably give them a weapon rating just to show how powerful those things are, but I would use it very, very sparingly. Ooh, I love this character sheet. This is great. I might actually steal this and convert it into a fillable PDF and that you can change the skills, because this would be great for anything, but this is great. I like this a lot more than the existing one. But that's it. That is that's Fate Condensed. Yeah, love it. 10 out of 10 Evil Hat. Thank you so much for creating this product. This is fantastic for hopefully new players coming to Fate and for existing GMs and players of Fate. I think this is absolutely fantastic. So if you would like to purchase this, I will have links in the description to Evil Hat's itch store and Drive Through RPG, and I will update the description if a POD version ever becomes available. Quick update, I did a previous video on the Space Toolkit that has like exited its beta and has art, and it is getting printed, which is awesome. Like not just POD, it's actually getting printed, and you could pre-order it or order it at your favorite local game store. So if you enjoyed that video and maybe you had the PDF, but you're like me and your favorite games, you kind of want to collect hard copies, the Space Toolkit is now available or is about to be available in print. I think I saw Fred Hicks post on Twitter that it will be available like mid-March. So be on the lookout for that. Anyway, hope you enjoyed this video. If you would like more deeper dives into Fate, or would like a video looking at Fate Accelerated or anything like that, let me know. I really, really, really enjoyed this system. I actually think if I'm going to start doing a little more videos, I'm moving past Pathfinder and might start looking at Star Trek Adventures, because I've started watching some actual plays and really enjoy how it seems how it looks at the table, but I have not really read the rule books yet. But I'm a Trekkie myself. And while I'm tempted to basically run everything that isn't D&D or Pathfinder, I'm tempted to just run any IP that I enjoy in Fate, because why not? Things like The Expanse, Star Trek, that Star Wars even, that already has its own kind of system for, like, it's worth checking out. Maybe there's some ideas we can steal. Like Momentum and Threat, I'm a big fan of in Star Trek Adventures. So if you like that, let me know. Again, sorry for kind of being away, but life gets in the way sometimes, and I'm not, I'm doing this for fun. So I hope you had fun too. Again, thanks to Evil Hat for creating this great product. I hope you really enjoyed it. If you did like it, please buy it. I'm actually pretty sure this product is pay what you want on itch and probably even drive through. But please support incredible RPG products. This PDF is well worth a couple of bucks of your hard-earned money. Even $5 goes a long way to showing the company Evil Hat that this is something the community wants. So anyway, thanks again for watching. Hope you enjoyed. We'll see you next time.